Hello everyone, my name is Megan Lavoda. I'm an ENFJ, and today I'm going to be answering a question that I got from Heather Bryant asking me, how can you distinguish between an INFP and an INTP? And she went on to say in the question, I don't have it exactly right up in front of me, but she went on to say that an INTP who is very highly developed might then go on to use their FE and then might mistake people, might be mistaken as an INFP. And I am not sure if you were asking this, Heather, because you are in between these two types, but the first thing that I want to say about this topic is that I think that just because of societal norms, okay, I'm like classic ENFJ here, bringing up societal norms, right? Because of society and the biases that we might have, I think that this distinguishing between these types is particularly difficult in women. And that's because if you are typing based on the Myers-Briggs dimension, the dichotomy between feeling and thinking, if you are thinking about that as a spectrum, it can be very confusing. And in my opinion, a lot of women are seen as being a feeler, whether or not what they're doing is actually feeling. They might be just, oh, you are being emotional, or oh, whatever. Like, there's just sort of this thing here where I've noticed a lot of thinker women being typed or mistyped by, or being accused of being a mistype and being called that they're a feeler. But the way to really distinguish this, so yeah, I just wanted to let that, get that out of the way just in case that was one of those things. So just be aware of that when you are typing someone, that the stereotype of a traditional INTP is always sort of, they're always painted as like this, you know, quirky, like, math nerd, but you know, not all INTPs are shy, white guys who like to read. Like, that's just not how it is. So really the way to know is to look at the cognitive functions. And so, you know, there are a lot of different places that you can look for this. I recommend mostly looking at Carl Jung's psychological types, but to me, the basic thing that you need to know is that all introverted functions are subjective, and they prefer depth over breadth. They are not very broad. They do not look at the spectrum of things. They are very deep and specific to you as a subject. And on the other hand, extroverted functions are broad, they are objective, and they require direct engagement with the extroverted world. And it is not something that is defined based on you as a subject. So, although, okay, and I also want you guys to realize that objective doesn't mean true, and subjective doesn't mean not true. Because if someone was to be very subjective in using either FI or TI to find what works for them, then that is going to work for them more than choosing something from the spectrum of the extroverted world. So IPs, which all either INFPs and INTPs, both are IPs. And according to Dave's superpower system, and I've also made a video sort of about what I've noticed in IPs, but that is the balance of the self versus the tribe. And you're putting the self first. There's a lot of stuff out there that will make you think that FI equals being selfish or something, and that's just not true. It's not any more selfish than TI, in my opinion. And also, it's either selfish or it's self-focused and self-aware. So whatever you want to say, it knows itself. It is focused on the self, and so its observations aren't from the objective external world. It's like looking within, defining themselves as a subject. So really, if you're looking at, if you don't know if someone's an INFP or an INTP, really, they couldn't be more different. Well, I mean, I know they have some similarities, but what are they identifying themselves with as a subject? An INTP is going to be identified with their own subjective logic. An INFP is going to be identified with their own subjective values. And I know a lot of this might just sound like jargon, and it's really hard. And you'll notice when watching other videos and just getting involved in the Myers-Briggs community, on the one hand, there's all this jargon, and on the other hand, there's all this fluff that really doesn't mean anything. So, I mean, I'm trying my best here to convey. I'll give you some examples here at the end. But I'm trying my best here because really the difference is subjective logic and subjective values. That's it. And I can define what those terms mean, but an INFP or an INTP is capable of being, you know, very empathetic with people and a good friend and a good partner and all of that. It's just, how are they doing it is really what you need to look for. So an INTP, for them, their brains, they know exactly what they think at any given time. They take a long time to make logical decisions. They're the type where if you give them new scientific information that goes against one of their points, they're not going to just be like, oh, okay, I guess this is true. They are going to need, in order to accept it, they're going to need to put it within everything else that they've already, or they're going to need to find the connection between that and everything that they've already thought. So it's not that INTPs won't change their mind, it's that they need to actually connect what that thing is with what they already have stored in their brain. And it's not like they're going to just abandon everything that they think. They will do that. It just might be a long process for them. So they're going to be thinking, who funded this study? What was their motive in doing this? Like, why? They're going to just be skeptical. And INFPs can be skeptical as well, but they're going to be more skeptical of someone's character than the logic behind it. So both INTPs and INFPs can be highly scrutinizing in a way, because everything that they're seeing, they are taking and then comparing to their own subjective stance. And it's, what are they identifying with? INFPs, on the other hand, they'll see like this is just an example, but they'll see like a stuffed animal and be like, oh, this is so me. Oh my God, it kind of looks like me, guys. And like, kind of like, this is kind of a joke. I'm not even trying to say that INFPs can't be intellectual, because of course they can. But maybe they'll identify with the mission, or the mission behind what someone's doing. Or maybe, you know, an INFP, they're going to want to like relate on an FI level. Not always. Okay, what am I trying to say here? I was talking about identifying, and I was comparing the ways that TI and FI identifies. So INTP, your identity is going to be your logic and your opinions. And so if someone questions your opinion, you're going to take that personally, because it was you that spent all that time piecing together everything that you think to you know, make that thought. And an INFP, if someone questions your character, that is going to be really harmful, because it's going to be like, oh my goodness, that's everything I am, because an INFP identifies with that. And so now let's take a look at the inferior function. Well, actually, before I get there, both of these types are going to be using NE, and so they are going to be looking at the breadth of the concepts and the ideas. They're going to gather ideas to them as an identity, their identity. INTPs are going to gather ideas to feed their like quest for knowledge and their understanding of what things are. And no, I'm not trying to say that INFPs don't have a quest for knowledge, but for them, it's going to be more like, I view myself as a smart person. I enjoy learning. Learning is fun for me, versus like, I need to understand the way that the world works because they just, it's hard for me to explain because TI is my inferior, but like, it really is just, it needs to click to me. Like, if it doesn't click to an INTP, then they aren't gonna take it. And an INFP has extroverted thinking, and so they can accept this is true, and this is true, and this is true. They might be more inclined to, when they are trying to decide what to believe or not, more inclined to trust, one of their good friends. And for them, it's going to be the sort of a parallel here is that INFPs, it might be very hard for them to let you in knowing their sort of inner world and sharing facts about them. They're going to be more like, how do I know that you are a good person? How do I know that you are not going to hurt me? That's the sort of scrutiny that an INFP has. It's like, well, you were a cheater once before, so how do I know you're not going to cheat on me now? Or, oh, you seem like you have, you seem like you're a lot of talk and no action. Or like, they're going to have their own personal values. It's harder for me to explain because my FI is not conscious. But I know what it is theoretically, and I've seen INFP friends of mine do this, where they are scrutinizing you to see whether or not they think that you are a good person, or a person that they could trust, or a person that they want to engage with, and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, so INTPs, okay, both of these types are going to fear backlash, but in a different way. And we can see that from looking at their inferior function. INTPs, they tend to fear, well, both of these types are going to care about what people think about them. I think that's human, but how am I going to word this? As IPs, you guys aren't focused on the tribe. You aren't focused on what everybody has come to a consensus on, where you could say that FE is what has everyone come to a consensus on as far as, values, and TE would be logic. TE users view their logic as self-evident, and FE users view their morals as self-evident because it is evident in the world. Look outside, see for yourself. Look at how people behave. INTPs can spend forever trying to prove some logical thing, where an INFP would be like, look outside you, that fact has always been true. Why are you wasting your time? The fact is true, and you know that it's true. And the INTP is like, oh, but I don't know why it's true, or I don't know how it connects with this thing. And like, for example, an INFP might say, you don't treat people like that. That's not a good way to be. Like, that is, that's just shady. And INTP is like, why, like, where did you get that from? Sort of. Okay, what am I trying to say? Like, or an INTP, they're gonna see these, I'm sorry, I'm sort of relating to the INTP a little bit more because I can flip and see how their TI and FE work. And so I'm apologizing if I'm not making this like a very strict parallel, but hopefully I'm still explaining something. Is that the INTP, you're gonna view the emotions as like self-evident, of like, don't harm people. A lot of INTPs I've noticed seem to adopt sort of utilitarianism points of view of like, just don't harm people. It's that simple. If you're not harming someone, whatever, just do it. Like, it's not a big deal. If it's not hurting anyone, why am I gonna worry about it? Like, sort of thing. Where an INFP is gonna view morality as a lot more nuanced, and they might even be more inclined, if we're looking at ethical philosophy, to enjoy philosophers. Now, it's been like 5 years since I took ethics in college, and so I remember the concepts, but I don't necessarily remember the names. But I want to say Kant. I'm pretty sure Kant, I've heard, was an FI user. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. But there were other philosophers that talk about emotions as being something that you just know from within, or morality is something that you just know from within, and that is gonna resonate way more with the INFP, because the INFP is gonna not be really swayed by how, so this is another thing to look at. What are they swayed by? INFPs might be more swayed, they might fear looking dumb, and if somebody is very confident and loud talking about what they think is true, an INFP might be more inclined to just go ahead and believe that, or if they can see how they got to that fact, not question it nearly as much. Whereas an INTP might be more swayed by morals, like if they're hanging out with the wrong crowd, if they're hanging out with people that are really negative and kind of rude, they might take on that behavior and not necessarily have that part of themselves being like, oh, that's wrong, or that's morally wrong. Because as long as, if they can't directly see how it's hurting anyone, they aren't going to be really focused on that. And an INTP, or an INFP, if they cannot directly see how the facts are wrong, if they've not experienced that fact as being wrong, then they are not going to be highly scrutinizing the facts. They're going to just think, oh, it's either true or false. Whenever people have extroverted judging and they're inferior, it could be this very rudimentary sort of understanding of, you know, external judging, because it's like FE, inferior FE might be like, it's either good or bad. You either are hurting someone or you're not. I don't understand the issue. Like, just don't hurt people. And INFP might say, like, you're either right or you're wrong. Like, read the facts. Like, look at what science says. Come on. And so INFPs can sort of be aware of a bias of not just trusting whatever you consider as authority. INFP is going to use their FI to trust who they think is an authority subjectively based on their emotions. Maybe they'll trust one news source over the other, or maybe they'll have, maybe they don't trust the authority news sources. Maybe they only trust the alternative news sources, and they say, oh, they're lying to you or something. They are going to know who they think is lying to you, who they think is ethical and all that. They're going to trust who that comes from. But they aren't going to necessarily want to do all the thinking on their own, because that just seems like a lot of work. That's going to really hurt their head. And so I'm not saying that INFPs are not capable of having that sort of deep thought and coming to their own conclusions, but I am saying that for them, they don't really enjoy that sort of logical scrutiny or whatever. And so they would so much rather, like, just trust somebody to do that for them in a way. And an INTP, on the other hand, they really, even if they really want to help the world, it's not that they don't care about other people and their emotions, but perhaps they don't want to be the one that is face to face actually doing the emotional labor that of FE. Perhaps they don't want to be the one doing that. Perhaps they want to donate to a cause where somebody else is doing that, you know. When something, even if an INTP has developed very highly to use their FE, it's still not going to be the function that they're going to enjoy using on a daily basis, all day, every day. They're going to just be more, a highly developed INTP, since that was part of your question, is going to just be more aware of the emotions around them and be able to move about the world in a way where you're being kind to people, so that you can be you and bring your brilliant brain that refines things to the world. And you're going to figure out how to offer that without being a total asshole, and without like making social faux pas left and right, and without like saying your thoughts in a way that people aren't going to understand or people aren't going to care about. So a developed INTP is going to know the market value, what people feel and what they care about, so that you can do what you do best and use your brain and help society come up with this sort of like truth that is refined. Ask questions. Ask questions in a polite, kind way, so that you can help everyone sort of get to a better version of their truth. Even if it ends in argument, even if it ends in disagreement, an INTP will always make you think about and consider and refine your own ideas. If an INTP is really healthy, they're going to do this in the kind way, and where people are going to be open to it and they're going to want more. And that's where the developed FE comes in, is you're going to know what people want and you're going to know how to adjust yourself. But a less developed INTP is going to just maybe question things in an uncouth way, and people might be mad and people might reject you, or say, no, I don't want any part of that. But it's still going to make them think before they go to sleep. They're still going to be thinking. Even if you don't see that part, trust me, if you are an INTP that is sharing your ideas and it's not received well, you're still going to sort of force that person to then think again, why do I think that? Because if anything, they're just going to need to be thinking about, well, what do I say back to that as an argument? And so, and if they get stuck, if they see the way that maybe they could have phrased that better, or maybe they could have considered something, then you did your job as an INTP. And that's what INTPs do best, is logically sort of connecting. It's almost like you're planting the seeds and growing some roots. It's almost like if you're like a carrot, versus like, I'll have to like, sorry, I'm not a censor, I'm not a gardener, I don't know like enough about vegetables, but it's almost like if introverted functions were like plants that grew in the ground, and extroverted ones were like trees that like planted up, you know. So that's just something. But you know, I've talked a lot about INTPs, and I guess that's because the question was like, well, what if an INTP who's nice and kind and wants to help and serve others is still going to be using TI and FE, you know, and FE, you know, notices the objective emotional environment and is less biased in what they want and feel. And an INFP is always going to know their personal stake in something. They're always going to know where they stand emotionally. They're going to know what they prefer and what they want. And they're going to try and be less biased about like the facts. And every person is biased because we all have like an introverted and extroverted sort of function. And I do think that the subjective introverted functions are more biased, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, as long as you just stand firm and, well, this is where I'm coming from. An INTP might say, well, this is just my opinion that I've always had. And an INFP might say, well, this is just like, the fact is that I would like a raise because I have kids to take care of and I like really would like that. Like, and they're gonna be more like aware and connected with the things that would make them happy and the things that fit with their desires. An INTP might, with bad FI, might, you know, live somebody else's life or live not in accordance to their values, or not even know what you mean. If you say, what are your values? They might say, oh, you mean my principles? You know, values and principles. I mean, INTPs are all about principles and INFPs are all about values. And if they are healthy, well-developed people, it's really not going to make a difference, because INFPs might have a value that they love learning, and INTPs might have a principle that if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all, or like the golden rule or something. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. Like people, we can all encode these lessons and understandings from other functions into our dominant function. Really just look at it as what is your what is the engine that you're using to drive the car? Is it a TI engine or is it an FI engine? FI doesn't really mind like paradoxes, and like it could be more impulsive into doing things of what it wants. It's not going to need a reason for everything. Sometimes the reason is I felt like it, like, you know? So hopefully that helped. I know this might not really help you distinguish the differences in your real life. If you have any more questions about a topic like this, I'm trying to do these Q&A videos as often as possible, so leave your question below. If you're wondering why I didn't make it more clear how to spot these people, it's because I want you to talk to them and really see how their brain works before you know who they are, because